Practical Prayer Podcast on New Thought Media Network with Bill Marchiony over here and the hidden guest behind curtain number one, which is Carol Lawrence. And Carol is recovering from a bout of what the medical establishment calls, I don't know, probably a virus.
Pretty much that's exactly what they said.
Yeah, and so we'll be participating audio only, which could be slightly weird on New Thought Media Network, but we'll roll with it, and essentially not going to be a problem at all on the Practical Prayer Podcast, which is an audio-only production. And by the way, what we're doing is this is the live pre-show, so we're going to record an episode of the Practical Prayer Podcast in a couple of minutes. And in the meantime, those of you who are watching us on New Thought Media Network, welcome. It's good to have you here. Wayne, we're live. I'm live. It's right there, and I'm giving Wayne a shout out. He likes to check and make sure stuff is live. So, and that's fine. Anybody who's watching later, you'll understand what's going on. And the podcast will be out in podcast land a week from Wednesday. So we got this production down to a science. I was just telling Carol before we came online that Robert Brzezinski was the guest last week, and we talked about the fundamentals of New Thought and religious science, for that matter. And it also occurred to me that I forgot to ask what we're going to talk about in this episode. Did you think of something? It
did occur to me that you didn't ask. And I thought, okay, he's really on it, so it doesn't matter because you're going to be able to handle I had to throw that in there. But, you handled it all. Listen, this is the Practical Prayer Podcast.
Yeah.
So...
I can talk about this stuff for a half an hour at a time.
Yes.
Without really doing homework, but knowing ahead of time what's going on is probably, I'm going to say, not unhelpful. So
okay, that's fine, but I don't know how many times I've ever given it to you really far ahead of time to do any homework. You don't have to do that, unless you do the homework quick in your head. But let me answer the question. So there's 5 steps to a practical prayer, of course, right. And then there's those, those steps in between in case you're, got some issues.
Yeah.
So I am, I believe in, I was in your class, I don't know how many years ago this was, but I'll never forget you talked about Jesus and the practical prayer. Mm-hmm. And, he lived the practical prayer. It was his life principle. And that just resonated with me so much. So here's the deal. There's step 1, that's acknowledging, God and all of that.
Okay.
We can do
well,
that.
let's save this for the podcast.
Yeah.
So I know where you're going now, but let's get the podcast going, because otherwise we're going to have to do that whole reestablish again, or the establish will have to be a reestablish.
Okay.
All right. So I'll go through the balance of the litany of things for people who are watching live or recorded on New Thought Media Network. If you're live, you can put in a comment, and we will see it now. If you have a prayer request or a question or a suggestion for a prayer or a suggestion for an episode, you can contact us through the chat, or you can go to bethelight.com, be-the-light.com. It says right down on the bottom over there. That's my website. There's a button over there to interact with the podcast and send us a message. So feel free to do that. That's also the home for all things that are practical prayer with the stuff that I do online. And thank you for being here. Is there anything I forgot, Carol?
I don't think so.
All right.
So we'll catch it up on. Okay.
Yeah, so, and it's going to be about one-step prayer. I love that.
No, it's not, but that's okay. You can still handle it anyway.
We shall see. All right, here we go.
A practical prayer is a prayer that works.
These discussions between Reverend Bill Marchiony and Carol Lawrence dive into the details of how it works and how to work it.
Reverend Bill is a New Thought minister and the author of Practical Prayer for Real Results.
Your new life begins with a new thought.
Carol Lawrence is on a spiritual quest, finding the New Thought teaching after decades on the pulpit in 3 different traditional denominations.
I've got some questions.
Together, they're exploring the philosophy and activities that come together from many of the world's religions to create the practical spirituality that is New Thought.
Welcome to the Practical Prayer Podcast. I'm Carol here with Reverend Dr. Bill Marchiony.
And
Did
you're
that not come
surprising
through
me today.
before? Why?
I heard it that time. That
Oh,
time
you
worked
didn't
just
hear
fine.
it before? Okay.
Yeah, you want to try one more time?
It's up to you.
Start again. This is
Okay.
Carol and Bill, Practical Prayer Podcast, take 2.
Welcome to the Practical Prayer Podcast. I'm Carol here with Reverend Dr. Bill Marchiony.
And I'm looking forward to our conversation today. First of all, welcome back. We missed you last week, and glad that you were getting back into full health, although it wasn't a health thing last week, or you didn't think it was. And I'm looking forward to this conversation because you invoked something that I said about Jesus and practical prayer.
Yes, yes. And it's interesting how this is going to go because I don't know if I laid it out correctly. I talked about the class that we had a couple years ago, and we were doing, and you were talking about how Jesus lived. The practical prayer steps were really the principles of his life that he lived by, and
Right.
that's how I perceive it and understand it. Now, when you take it step by step, however, and I listen to things that people are concerned about and what is causing them spiritual indigestion, let's say. It's
Okay.
it's between step 2 and 3. So you can, let's assume that you understand the unification of yourself with God. You got
Okay,
that down.
and that's the first step. The recognition is the first step.
Right,
We
and
recognize that God is the infinite creative power. And the second step is is unification, where we identify that because God is all there is, that's what we are, and all that is God is available to us.
You finish.
That's a
Okay, I'm trying to-
I just for anybody who doesn't know the steps, I wanted
okay.
to make sure we're not shorthanding.
Oh, okay.
And yes, I'm done.
All right. So, oh, this is so great. So then there's the recognition. However, there is something between the unification or recognize our unity with God and the recognition part. Realization, I'm sorry.
The realization part, the affirmation, we're
Yes.
claiming the new experience or the good that we're inviting in. Yeah.
Yes. And so I understand that's a toughie. That's a toughie. And I'm thinking that there's something in between mentally in our mental experience between the unification and the realization, because I listen to your prayers and you say turn away from what you don't want essentially and turn to what you do want.
Yeah.
Now, that sounds fairly simple, but it really isn't. So what gets in the way of that pivot, I think, is what's going on in your head between the step 2 and step 3.
You mean not really believing that power is within us and that we can actually create this
Yeah.
or have this new experience?
Well, yeah, the power, yes, that also, but I really thought about this a lot. And what else could it be? Because nobody is really going to deny the power of God,
Right.
God or spirit or whatever. God is the greatest thing there ever was and can do anything. And without using all those fancy theological terms, that's it. God is all there is and can do it all. Well, why is that not happening with me? Okay, so just pivot away from what you don't want to what you do want. But there's something in there that I think prevents the pivot. And it's,
Yeah, that's our psychology, our training, whatever is buried down in our belief system that has brought that experience that we don't like to us to begin with, it's all still working.
And it's a lot. It's a
Oh yeah,
lot.
it's a lifetime.
Yeah, and it's so much so that it keeps cropping up, like different things. As soon as you get a handle on one, here comes another and another and another. And there's sometimes we'll use this term, the Jesus complex. So you are you may be thinking that you're doing good and you're doing what Jesus did, when in fact that is not yours to do.
Hmm.
And what you're doing is bringing about a result that you don't want.
Yep.
So then you got to go, but recognizing that is a chore. I don't know how you can make it through this whole thing without a mentor or a teacher. I don't know how you do that, because it's I think it's just really good to have somebody to help you over those difficult times. For example, you can't make the pivot because you don't think that you're worthy,
Right.
or because you know all the crap is in your life, like other people don't know, but you know. And so, I asked the question recently, what do you think? God is sitting there with a book saying, okay, I would give you this, but what about this, this, and this? And, I just like really, so I think you need somebody to help you pass those kind of moments.
I completely agree. And that is why spiritual community is really valuable, to have other people who are involved in the same techniques and processes and practices who you can share with. Some of it is about technique and how you're doing. Some of it is about prayer support, because there's only one mind. So if we're going to be praying for Angelo, then it doesn't matter whether it's Angelo doing the praying or me or somebody who's never met him. We're all using the same one mind. So being in community is very important, and that's one of the things that my spiritual community, New Thought Philadelphia, is all about. It's about getting people together in person and online, and just having an opportunity to dive into the teaching a little bit and to share. The other part of it is study. So there are lots of books and lots of workshops and lots of classes. And when we get ourselves into one of those classes, whether it's a live in-person one like our Beyond Limits class, which we'll be doing again after the first of the year, or if it's something like the online practical prayer class, where you can just go and take it at your own pace and learn the steps. It's about going through the process. It's about having a new experience. It's about exposing ourselves to some new possibilities, some new insights, and then going through it. And of course, having a mentor, having somebody you can work with individually, that's tremendously helpful as well. And that's the other thing that we do, is mentoring, which is teaching one-on-one, and also healing prayer practice, doing practical prayer work for somebody else. Because when somebody comes to me and they want a practical prayer for some issue that's in their life, it's a result of their belief system. I am not carrying their baggage. I don't have their belief system. I have my own belief system, and I know that the good that they're seeking is available, so I can do the prayer for them without their baggage getting in the way. As long as they're willing to accept that new result, then it works. And it's the same process, regardless of how we're doing it. So I completely agree with you on the value and importance of a mentor and those other elements.
I do, and I was I thank you for articulating that much better than I did. I think what I meet people that I think we're all broken in some way. Some are acting out of their brokenness differently than others, and I'm not talking about living a stupid life. You know, not being able to embrace the power of God to supersede all of the stuff that's in your subconscious mind. That's a big thing to think about, especially when you don't know it. And the list keeps getting longer in my experience with folks that have these challenges to get over. It's just amazing, and I'm trying not to express bitterness, but it's amazing how this life has deposited so many terrible obstacles in people's way of experiencing the goodness, the good, the gooderness of God. It's just, do you know what I mean? I'm trying to
Yeah.
lighten it up because I was getting a little serious there, but it's so many things that are in the subconscious mind that people aren't aware of. And, you feel like you want to just hold their little face, like when they were, my little kids, I just hold their little face and say, look at me when I say this. God is on your side. Okay? And, and I just wrote a piece like, do you think God has really got this book you're praying and he's looking up all these dates and you remember when you did such and such and such a thing? And I'm going to borrow from something you said that made me really laugh. Like, that is so egotistic.
Oh, that's huge arrogance to think that God is paying attention to everything that you do.
That you do.
Yeah, 14.2 billion light years across this huge galaxy, and God's paying attention to what you're thinking about.
Now, and I went with that, okay? But then there's the teaching that this is God, and God is individual and very concerned about you on an individual level. And so you, in perspective of the vast universe, really seems like nothing, but then there's that teaching that you are something. And I'm thinking, okay, all of that's true, but what real difference does this make, right? You stole a candy bar when you were 22, when you doggone knew better.
Mm-hmm.
You did it. You ate it. Like, you can't undo that. Do you think that the God of the universe is looking that up and withholding your tuition or whatever it is that's so, you know what I mean? And it's putting it all in perspective.
Yeah.
But I think
well,
it happens there between step 2 and 3.
Well, yeah, and the big thing that we're all praying for is to get over our belief that we're separate from God. Mm-hmm. And so I'll use your scenario. 22-year-old steals a candy bar, eats it, enjoys it. I'm going to presume that that's the purpose of doing that. So there was that larceny experience, and then there was the whatever the motivation was for that, and then there was the satisfying experience of eating the candy bar. And then what? Does that make the person a bad person? And when we get into that value judgment, whether if the person who did it thinks that made him a bad person, then it did. Not because the act did it, but because their belief did it. So it's like, oh, I did this thing, I'm a bad person. And how could I possibly be one with God? And we use that as a way to convince ourselves of separation. And that makes it a little more difficult to do that unification, where we identify that I am a divine and perfect expression of this infinite creative power, and I'm using that creative power to create my life, and I can create something new and wonderful. Because a little voice comes along and says, no, you can't, because you're a bad person. Remember that candy bar?
Okay.
We don't wait for God to judge us. It's an inside job.
Okay. So then, and I like that. I do. So would this be an incorrect way to proceed with that? Yeah. Okay. So stealing the candy bar was a really, bad thing to do. It was pretty shitty. Okay. You can't undo it. So just don't do shitty stuff anymore. Okay? We all know when we're doing something stupid.
Right.
We all know it. So
and
just
I did
don't.
a whole bunch of stupid things when I was in my early 20s.
But you're not going to do it again.
That's right. But if I still did it and I think that I'm bad because I did it then the belief stays forever, even if I stop doing those things anymore.
Yeah. I think I'm trying to work around bad and good, and maybe that's something that I'm still struggling with, because I'm not trying to convince you that what you did was okay. Right. I'm simply saying you're more mature now. You're in a different place. So don't do that anymore. Like, don't hang back there with the person that you are no longer.
Right.
Where are you now? And now is all that matters.
Mm-hmm.
So where are we going with this? Let's move forward.
Yeah. When somebody else does it, and we carry that anger about them, it's resentment. So we have a judgment about what somebody else did, and we carry it, and it can affect our life in the future. That's a resentment. And forgiveness is getting past the resentments, putting them down. Yeah, that thing happened, and it did not make me happy at the time, but it's not going to control my life or my relationship or the way I'm going to be living going forward. So, and using your example, if I believe that I am, we'll use the word bad, or unworthy. If I think that something that I did in my past makes me unworthy of something good happening in my future, that's my belief system. And that's what I get to battle with. And what we want to do in this teaching is say, regardless of what you did previously, as Carol says, do it differently now and put down the judgment left over from before. For whatever reason that candy bar disappeared from the counter and wound up in your belly, it was the best that you could do at the time.
Yeah.
And you get to forgive that younger version of yourself so that you can let go of the judgment and the resentment about how bad you were and continue life knowing that's not the sort of thing you do anymore.
And I think that's important to just stand in that moment and make a decision. That's the pivot that you talk about. For me, it is. It's the pivot. What am I going to think? What's my mental state right now? Am I going to continue looking back and feeling those things? You're certainly welcome to do that. But you're never going to move forward into a different space if you keep doing the same old thing. So How about we try something different? Well, it was bad. Okay, it was bad. All right? It was bad. So it's done. You can't undo it. Don't do that anymore, and let's keep it moving. And besides that, people forget, right? The candy bar may not have been missed. If it was, nobody figured out who did it. I mean, you could just go 1,000 different ways. It does not matter with where you're going forward. I think it's, and this might be, me being a baby boomer saying that it's a character building thing to acknowledge what has not been appropriate and to say, I need to do something different. I think that that's a good thing. But if you don't ever acknowledge that you need to do something different, how do you grow?
Mm-hmm.
But you got to grow or you won't move forward to step 3, the realization. You can't realize anything, I don't think, if you don't acknowledge that I'm not doing this anymore, I'm going to do this, or I'm not going to think this, I'm going to think this.
Yeah, there are actually times where people are very good at doing prayer and being very successful with practical prayer in 1 or 2 or 3 different areas of their life, and they're completely stumped in a 4th or 5th. And that has to do with what we have in our belief system. Let's take a break, and when we continue, we'll talk about, let's talk about the 4 questions. Are you ready to get results? Now, that's not a rhetorical question. Are you ready to get results? RUR2GR. That's actually the abbreviation for the steps in a practical prayer. Recognition, unification, realization, gratitude, and release, with a couple of extra steps in there in case some doubt creeps in along the way. RUR2GR. This class is about the prayer technique that's common to all of the spiritual practices and religions in the most effective prayers that they have. And by effective, I mean that the prayer works. It actually creates a change in the experience of the person doing the prayer. It gets a result. We're going to begin with theory, and then we're going to take it into practice. By the end of the class, you will have your very own practical prayer that will help create transformation in your life.
Welcome back to the Practical Prayer Podcast. I'm Carol, here with Reverend Dr. Bill Marchiony.
We're having a wonderful discussion about prayer and when we get stuck in believing that we are divine enough to actually create something new or use that creative power to create something new in our lives. And I'm going to go over the 4 questions, which are wonderful for assisting us with the pivot. But first I want to say that when I'm working with a client doing prayer on their behalf, if they come in with one thing that's a problem, then we tend to spend a lot of time talking about what the possible things might be in their belief system, in their subconscious, that is causing that problem to come about. If they have 2 or 3 or 4 different things going on in their life, this is a problem, that's a problem, the other one's a problem, it becomes really easy to see what's going on, because usually it's one prayer request showing up in 3 or 4 different ways. So if somebody's having a problem at work, and they're having a problem with their relationship, and they're having a problem with their kids, then it's like, okay, now it's a relationship and people thing, and bringing our best selves to it, and we get to focus in that lane. And really dive down, what do these have in common? Because, back to the basic fundamentals, there's one. And if you get 3 different perspectives on it, then it's much easier to see what that one is. We'll talk about the 4 questions. So this is from Robert D. McDonald, colleague out in California. The first question is, are you happy with the experience of life that you're having now? Yes or no? And if the answer is yes, then you're done. Congratulations, keep it up. And if the answer to question 1 is no, question 2 is, what experience do you want to be having instead? And that's the invitation for the pivot. Okay, so question number 1, are you happy? No, I'm not happy. Okay, I don't really care what it is that's making you unhappy. What will it, when you're happy, what will that look like? Mm-hmm. And the third question is, once I have it, how will I know that I have it? And that one is really powerful, because if the person, I want to be happy. Okay, great, you want to be happy. Who doesn't want to be happy? We can do a prayer for you to be happy. How will you know you're happy? For somebody who's, been suffering from burning, itching skin for their entire life, then just waking up one morning and feeling like their skin doesn't itch is delightful. For somebody else, it's like, that's what it starts with right before I start arguing with my kids.
Yeah.
So once I have it, once I'm happy, once I'm successful, once I'm prosperous, how will I know that I am that thing? And being able to quantify it, very specifically, is a wonderful exercise. And we get to determine. It's not a dollar figure. It's not, when I'm making $75,000 a year, or $150,000 a year, or $500,000 a year, that's when I'll be prosperous. It's not what it comes down to, because prosperity is a feeling of enoughness. So if my bills are $1,000 a month, then what I need to have is in excess of $1,000 a month, and I'll be okay. Maybe it's $2,000 a month. And if I get $10,000 a month, that's great, except if my expenses go up. So what I'm really going to be praying for, what I really want to be experiencing, the way I'll know that I'm having that new experience, is that I will have plenty to pay my bills, to spend, to share, to save, and without the pressure, with the freedom. And it turns from a financial prayer into a freedom prayer pretty quickly. So that's the third question. Once I have it, how will I know that I have it? Quantify the result that we're looking for. And then the fourth one, which is the advanced study, is what's keeping me from having it now? And that kind of digs into the question that you had there about, getting from that unification step of recognizing that I am one with God and claiming that there's something that I believe to be good that's available to me now.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think that one is, excuse me, that's the one. I mean, number 3, as you were explaining, the prosperity and so forth, that's enlightening and it's important. But what's keeping you from having those experiences?
Right.
Are,
where's the doubt coming from?
Yeah. And that's what you're calling it, doubt?
Doubt, disbelief, hidden belief, false belief, all of the above. It shows up in a lot of different ways. You can give it different labels, but it is that inherent disbelief that this process is going to work for me this time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I think when I started out and when I thought about bringing this to the podcast, I was thinking about the time that one might need to spend in that space a little bit. Maybe not during the prayer especially if you do foxhole prayers. I think that's what you called them,
Mm-hmm.
foxhole prayers.
Foxhole prayer is something bad happens and we dive into a quick prayer, and the rest of the time we forget about it.
Yeah, yeah. So I think the foxhole prayers are, oh, we can talk about them another time because I've had some of those. And I'll say, wait a minute now. Step 1, 2, I'm cool with 1, I'm cool with 2. Where am I right now? Let me deal with 3. But it's that little space in between 2 and 3.
Mm-hmm. And we can cultivate a relationship with the infinite. I mean, that divine power and presence is within us. And sometimes we're so busy with our mind chatter that we don't notice, or we don't pay attention, or we think that we've got it going on so we don't need it. And this infinite power is infinite, and its love is unconditional. So there's nothing that we're going to do that's going to diminish that love. So it's always going to be there, and it's always going to be available, and we will have access to it to the extent that we allow ourselves to. So cultivating a spiritual practice where we practice, where we, on a routine basis, focus on that divine power and presence and identify that we're one with it. It can be in a prayer. That's what meditation is.
Mm, yeah.
That's shutting up and inviting the infinite to share with us and to be connected with that divine power and presence and allowing that goodness to come about. So, yeah.
I like that when you said allowing that goodness to come about. And somebody just popped into my mind and said, but why would that, it just can't come to me? And the person I'm thinking about is they've in their mind, they've conjured up so many reasons why they can't possibly ever even get the attention of God. like, like, all right, so is this a special person here, or are there a lot of people like that? And yeah.
Of all people, Henry Ford famously said, if you think you can, you're right. If you think you can't, you're right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's kind of what it boils down to.
Yeah, it does. It's like you throw your hand up. Like I have thrown my hands up a couple of times. Say, okay, like, listen, what you gonna do? You can stay here or not, really. It's up to you.
Yep. My friend Michelle has a foxhole prayer. When things go sideways, she says something, and I'm paraphrasing now. It's something along the lines of, I will be grateful to see how God solves this problem.
I like that one. Mm-hmm. Because and by the way, I use that occasionally. You know, I really want to see God. I want to see how this works out, because it'll be just interesting, and it takes the weight off of me. It's acknowledging the power and presence of God in every way.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm sort of like out of it, you know, and I know you're not. I know you're not going to leave me in this screwed up situation. So it really will be a nice story to tell how you work this out.
Yeah, yeah, and sometimes there's something for us to do. Sometimes it's not just about watching God work it out. You know, okay, I'm going to step off the field and just watch now. No, it's still going on, but we don't necessarily have to think up the idea of everything that's going to happen for us and for other people. Sometimes it's about inviting in that guidance so that we know what's next to do and what's ours to do and also what's ours to let go of.
Mm-hmm. And I think maybe it's okay to come up with little things that work for you. You know, when my children were small, and I have 3, and they're 2 years apart, so they were all going through the whatever stages they were going through at the same time. And I would say to them, you know, listen, God is on the mother's side, okay? God is on my side. And sometimes I'd walk away thinking, all right, God, you can speak up any time now. Let me know. I know I have some part in this, but right now I'm not seeing it. You're on my side. Now, that was more from my belief, I think. It worked with them, right? It stopped them for a moment. But it was me. It was letting me know that God is on my side. I can chill And when there's something I need to say or do, I'm going to know it.
Yep. Yeah. And how many people do we know of who say, God is on my side and not on your side?
Yeah, I don't know about the not on your side.
Yeah.
That's,
Well, I mean, if we're reminding ourselves that God is on my side because I'm the one who's in here, and understand that everybody else can make exactly the same claim, that's the same as the first two steps of the prayer. There's only one, and I'm part of it, and everyone's part of it. And the reason that I know that I'm part of it is because everyone's part of it. They kind of go hand in glove.
that's cool. I think I would not have, and I'm pretty glad I didn't tell my kids that when they were young.
Oh, and not you? Yeah.
No, listen, God is on the mother's side, right? I am here appointed to handle this situation. So you just sit and
Yeah.
chill while I go. Because, yeah, in this generation, and they think differently. But that's a whole nother story. Whole nother thing.
Yeah. Let's take another break and then do that prayer on that exquisite guidance and the next perfect steps.
Good.
We already did that one.
Learn to put practical prayer to work in your life. The steps are simple to learn and let you begin to get real results to create the life of your dreams immediately. Reverend Bill Marchiony's widely acclaimed book, Practical Prayer for Real Results, gives you a clear summary of the New Thought principles behind practical prayer and the series of easy-to-understand steps found in the most effective prayers from religions and spiritual practices all over the world and throughout history. Practical prayer is not a replacement for your religion or practice. It's a technique to make the work you do in consciousness even more effective. The book includes 40 prayers on various topics that you can adapt as needed and use as your own. Practical Prayer for Real Results is available in paperback, Kindle, and audiobook on Amazon or at b-the-light.com. That's b-the-light.com.
Welcome back to the Practical Prayer Podcast. I'm Carol, here with Reverend Dr. Bill Marchiony.
Yeah.
Having a great discussion.
It's a wonderful discussion on doubt and doubting God within and opening to God and pivoting and 4 questions. It's, yeah, as my friend Carol says, that's a lot.
It is a lot. It is. And that's, I think for me, it's like the practical prayer is amazing. It's just not something to say. It's something we live in, you know.
Exactly. Because the fact of the matter is, if this is true ever, it's true always. That we are
Yes.
creating our lives according to our beliefs. And everything that happens, therefore, is created by that same process. So if it's ever works, it's always working, and that includes all the stuff we label as good or bad or unhappy or fulfilling or miraculous or tragic. It's all that same thing. And once we are understanding that the process is at work, then we can get ourselves engaged and involved in it in a way that brings around an experience that's more aligned with what we desire.
Exactly. Yeah.
So we're up to prayer time today, and this is one of my favorite prayers. I actually do prayers along these lines a lot. And this is a prayer for divine guidance on the next perfect steps to take and to take them. Because what happens is when we are, it's possible to have the infinite tell us exactly what needs to be done, and then sit there on the meditation pillow or in our life and not do it. Oh, well, God said these steps need to be taken. If I don't take them, or somebody's not taking them, then nothing's going to change. So the prayer is about divine guidance on the next perfect steps and taking them to bring about the good. And I'll get into some detail when we go into that. So let us pray. Starting by turning our attention to that infinite creative power, that divine presence, that one source of everything that exists everywhere. It's God or nature or spirit or the one. It is the universe. It is the divine. It's the Big Bang. It's the source from which everything flows. In the beginning, there was darkness and void and God. In the beginning, there was the singularity. And then the Big Bang. And everything that exists everywhere has exploded and expanded and recombined upon itself from that one. When the infinite said, "Let there be light," suddenly there was light. In a place where there hadn't been no light, that there was only God. Darkness, void, and God. So that light is God itself. And everything that followed is God itself, taking individualized, particularized, specific form. Everything is that divine light of love, taking its own form. Everything. Everywhere. Everyone. And knowing that, it is not possible to assume that that divine power and presence, that infinite creative substance and energy, is everywhere in the universe except the 3 feet around me. It is not possible that any one of us is exceptional to the extent that we're separate from that oneness. So that divine power and presence abides within. That infinite intelligence that knows how to create this manifest universe abides within. That intelligence is the same intelligence with which we think. So I know that in whatever circumstance and situation we are facing, that infinite intelligence is available to guide us, to inform us in our own way, with great clarity about the next perfect steps that are ours to take, and then the motivation to take them. We know exactly what is ours to do. We know exactly what is ours to release. And then we do it. We do our part, taking that next perfect step. And then knowing that the next perfect step after that is also revealed. The process of good, of success, of uplift, of harmony, and what we describe as that next great experience is already underway. It's happening now. That good is unfolding uniquely for each of us, but the same process for everyone. That infinite intelligence guiding and directing each of us to our next perfect step. And we take them. And the cycle continues. Onward and upward, bringing more joy, more uplift, more happiness, more contentment, more love, more peace, more vitality, more creativity, more harmony into our experience. I'm grateful for it. I'm grateful for the wonderful ways that it's showing up. I'm grateful to know that even though it's showing up differently for everyone within the sound of my voice, it is the same process unfolding. It is that one infinite presence sharing itself in new and wonderful ways. And so with gratitude for all of this good, I speak this word and release it into that creative law that creates everything. And I know it is now creating this. This good is already underway. This insight is already happening. This download is already in process. And so this deep feeling of thanks, I speak this word, I let it go, and I know that it is so. And so it is.
The Practical Prayer Podcast with Reverend Bill Marchiony and Carol Lawrence is a production of BeTheLight.com.
be-the-light.com.
Where you can find more information about practical prayer for real results.
Our theme is by Music of Wisdom. You can learn about the spiritual community of New Thought Philadelphia with daily guided meditations,
Weekly celebrations of spirit,
and Reverend Bill's classes in practical spirituality
at newthoughtphilly.org.
And that's a wrap on episode number 131 of the Practical Prayer Podcast. You're watching the post show now on New Thought Media Network.
I think that conversation was amazing, but sometimes I think I say that all the time.
That conversation was amazing. That conversation was so good that I didn't know what to call it. When these things get posted in podcast land, they have a name, and usually it's really obvious from the very beginning of the conversation. And this one had more loops and swirls than a roller coaster ride.
This one? You thought?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'm no help to you where that's concerned because I had terrible time giving a subject matter to a sermon. And I remember, I think I told you before, one time I was at such a loss, and I was at the microphone and I realized I did not have a title for the sermon. So I just said, listen, I've got no title. I'm going to I'm going to give you this, and you tell me what the title is later, and then we'll do it. It was like, I'll use, and I felt so, I felt awful. I said, but I'm honest. Like, I can't figure out what to call this. So,
Okay, that
you
works.
know, yeah.
Yeah, I come up with the topic and the description of my Sunday talks a couple of weeks in advance so we can put them in the website and the social media. And then don't write them until the week before. So yesterday's talk actually was called Deck the Halls. And it was tangentially about that, but there was another really fun idea that came along that managed to make it into the talk, which is a custom-made designer leather bag. A custom-made designer leather bag that's filled with consciousness. That's what we are. So
I'm definitely going to look at that one. Absolutely, I'm going to look at that one today.
Yeah, and for those of you who are watching on New Thought Media Network, it was part of the Sunday stream yesterday, so you can find it here on New Thought Media Network as well. But yeah, and there was a lot of detail, and I did loop around to decking the halls and how that tied in, but it wasn't until the very end.
I can't wait.
Well, thank you. I'm glad that you're back up to snuff, and have a great week. Get your temperature aligned, and you'll be back at the beach any minute now, right?
I hope so. But thank you so much. You've been really patient with me, letting you know just before I can make it, I can't make it. Actually, on Wednesday, I think it was Wednesday, I was going to send you a note saying, everything is fine. You don't have to worry. I'm going to be cool. I'll be there on Monday. And I was just really feeling great. And then all of a sudden, bang. And I thought, boy, I'm glad I didn't send him that text.
You can also send me a text that says, hey, a little prayer over here would be nice.
Yeah, I'll keep that in mind. I'll do that.
I know how to do them.
I think you do. I absolutely think you do. I don't know what I was thinking. Thank you. It will not happen again.
You bet.
So.
I'll see you next week.
See you.